Dying sucks, so I try to add nice layers of defense to my character, and I've created what I'm going to call the Immortal Pathfinder version 2.0. And so in today's video, I'm going to go over some of the items from a nice safe location, like, right here. This is of course using the Bloodnotch combo. That's the first way we get a ton of our recovery. It's especially handy to have Bloodnotch for when your Progenesis flask is down. You'll also want to make sure you have a little bit of Recoup to recover from the Progenesis dot, and a little bit of Leech. Progenesis itself is an amazingly powerful flask, especially if you're using a microdistillery belt. And to top everything off, we're using the Defiance of Destiny amulet to recover a percentage of missing life. You can almost literally AFK in Harbingers and run quite rippy maps. Now, bleed effects have been slightly problematic once I run out of enemies to hit throughout my gameplay, which is why I'm using a cast when stunned steel skin setup. Though an unaffected by bleed malevolence eye is probably the better choice long term. Furthermore, the steel skin is, well, nice, as is the evasion rating from Grace, but neither of those things are really going to make a meaningful difference most of the time, because there are a couple of other things which end up being dangerous to this build. The first is non-ailment damage over time, which is only an issue on uber bosses or if you stand in it for a really long time. The second is absolutely massive single hits, such as the Maven Brain Blast. This character simply isn't set up to take a spike of damage that massive, although there are very few things in maps which are going to seriously put a dent into your build. So overall, I really like this defensive setup for a couple reasons. The first is flexibility. Bloodnotch and Immutable Force are accessible by anyone who has 2 jewel sockets. Progenesis is a flask and it's extremely powerful, meaning again, any build can use it. And last up, Defiance of Destiny is, well, a pretty ubiquitous amulet that has life and resistances. You may lose some damage by integrating it into your build. And by the way, if you want to see more about how I've been integrating it into my build, I have a video on that. Or if you want to see some of the changes I've made recently, both to my build and farming strategy, then do be sure to get subscribed, leave a like while you're down there, and for now, let's get back to talking about this setup. Because the only real barrier to entry here is cost. Progenesis is not cheap, especially this league. I remember when I bought the first Progenesis I ever owned, right after it came out it was maybe 3-ish divines, probably because the item was completely unknown. And ever since, every league the price has gone up and up and up, as it's increased in popularity. Luckily, I leveled all the way to 100 without using the Progenesis, because I wanted to see if these defenses worked without it. They very much do. Does this mean you will occasionally die to dumb stuff? Yes. Does this mean that on uber bosses, occasionally you'll run into problems? Yes. Should you probably watch out for bleeds and use the Bleed Pantheon? Well, it's either the Bleed or the Burning Ground Pantheon, as both can technically kill you. And personally, I prefer the Burning Ground immunity because if you're standing still with a Bleed, and especially if you can hit something, it's not really particularly dangerous in most cases. Though, feel free to choose the other option if you prefer. And now that I've talked about all this, I want to talk a little bit about how the layers combine to make it work. So first up, I'm going to exclude Progenesis from this part. That'll come next. Instead, I'm going to be talking specifically about the Bloodnotch and the Defiance of Destiny. Every time you get hit, provided the enemy is able to stun you, which with my setup, they always are, you recover up to 60% of that hit as life instantly, meaning you only take 40% of normal damage. Though if you're one-shot, it does still kill you. This means it's much harder for enemies to kill you outright. Instead, your health slowly goes down and slowly goes down and slowly goes down. And this is where Defiance of Destiny comes in, because the lower your health gets, the more effective its healing is. You gain 40% of missing unreserved life before being hit by an enemy. Therefore, it counts against the enemy's hit damage. So, as your life gets lower, you have more missing life, which means the healing from your Defiance of Destiny starts to kick in addition to the Bloodnotch. It also effectively means small hits will never kill you. Maybe you'll get to half and all of a sudden shoot back up to full. But as powerful as these defensive layers are, they probably aren't quite enough just by themselves, especially if you're doing really rippy content. which is why there's a couple extra defensive layers that I added in. For example, Leech with Instant Leech. Not only does this sustain my mana entirely, but it gives me a good bit of life per second. And the Instant Leech, well, happens instantaneously. Because I hit a lot, I have a bit of life gain on hit and a bit of Recoup. Not only does this Recoup counter the degen from Progenesis, or more accurately the life loss, but furthermore, it feels quite good to have because there's that instant spike of health whenever you take a big hit. The Progenesis Flask itself prevents a portion of the hit damage you take, but remember, your Defiance of Destiny is healing you based on what that hit would have done. It's happening before the hit, therefore you are healing for the base damage before any mitigation, which means it is even easier to outsustain enemy damage and heal yourself using Defiance of Destiny. Especially since you only really need to act on about 40% of your damage because Bloodnotch is erasing the rest, assuming a perfect roll. All of these things combine in an absolutely wonderful way for a build that feels great. Now, I'm no stranger to defensive setups in Path of Exile. I had a nearly immortal Aegis Aurora max res build, and there were things that could tank which this can't. And I've played Giga Regen mana builds, which could actually totally ignore dots. They weren't a thing, but big hits killed them because their raw mitigation was low. What I'm trying to say is, no matter how immortal your character is, Path of Exile does find a way to counter it, and my setup isn't completely perfect, as I don't quite have the bleed immunity. Something else to be noted is that this setup is a little bit weaker to enemy penetration than Divine Flesh or a Taken As setup. That's because I've been playing my character as a mapping build. I haven't really been doing uber bosses. I did pinnacle bosses, and I destroyed them without issue. And I'm sure if I swapped a couple things around, I could technically even integrate Divine Flesh into this build without any issue. I'd be able to crush them no problem, or maybe I just have enough damage to overwhelm them. Their incidental hits wouldn't be a big deal, but something like Double Atziri Flame Blast is probably going to toast me instantly. Which is why this is the almost immortal Pathfinder 2. The reason it's number 2 is this is the second time I've played this setup. The main change from the first time, I got rid of a Petrified Blood because ultimately I didn't want to have to constantly hit a life flask. And so that's my defensive setup. Hopefully you enjoy it. You can either use all of these items together for the best effect, or pick and choose them individually based on what you need. Defiance of Destiny and Bloodnotch are really good against hits, so is Progenesis, but if you need something against damage over time, then other options are there. A good example of this would be getting a massive amount of life regeneration rate similar to an RF build. That's going to effectively erase dots because most of them don't actually hit that hard, especially when you're at max res. Just watch out for Burning Ground, that can be quite nasty. I did all this because personally I hate dying and the leak mechanic can be a little bit rippy. But what about you? Is your build tanky enough to survive the leak mechanic, and if not, will this help you change it? Be sure to let me know down below. And if you want to know more about how defenses and defensive layering works, you can always read my article over at Maxwell GG. Or if you want something else to watch, maybe check out How My Build Works, a farming strategy that I recently used, or some hot new builds that other people are playing. I'll have all of those up in the card and down below. Before I go, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for the continued support. If you support at a $5 a month level, then you'll see your name on screen right now, just like these fine folks here. Link to support is below, and it goes a long way to helping me make videos about cool mechanical interactions that don't tend to do as well in the YouTube algorithm. But I keep doing it because it's something I greatly enjoy, and so your direct support is much appreciated. With that said, thanks for watching to the end, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you again sometime soon.